This morning I'm briefly going to talk to you on measuring carbon for forests. Michael's only given me 5 minutes, so I haven't got too carried away with the presentation. So, the New Zealand ETS allows forest owners to claim carbon credits as a forest grow over time for post-1989 forests. To claim carbon credits, ETS participants and permanent forest sink initiative covenant holders must measure the amount of carbon stocks and change over time. There are two methods of measuring carbon growth and carbon change over time for forests, and they depend on the area of forest land you have in the ETS. That's for forests under 100 hectares and forests 100 hectares and over. Forest under 100 hectares, we just have simple regional default tables. They're called lookup tables developed by the Ministry of Primary Industries. And these are just regional averages. We've got them here for the likes of Auckland, Wellington, Taranaki, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, West Coast. So they're just based on averages. Using these pre-calculated default tables is simple and low cost, but these tables do not reflect the individual carbon sequestration or growth of particular forests. For example, forest in a high growth area and or grown for carbon production, the carbon sequestration would be a lot more than what the tables estimate. And alternatively, if the forest is grown in a low productivity area with a low stocking, you'd be growing less carbon than what the tables would predict. It has been suggested, and there are some forest owners that are banking on the lookup tables being conservative, and they're hoping that when they go through the measurement approach, which you do for areas over 100 hectares, they might gain 20 to 30% more carbon credits. We'll wait and see about that. Okay, that gets me to the next way of measuring forests. That's for areas 100 hectares or over. It's a little bit more complicated, a bit more involved. The Ministry of Primary Industries, or formerly MAF, they've developed a measurement-based method, and this is site-specific. This is called the Field Measurement Approach, or FMA. The FMA is designed to be an accurate forest-specific approach to carbon assessment. It's designed to be equally applicable to exotic and indigenous forest. It's designed to deliver a more equal approach that recognises the entitlements and obligations between different forest participants in their forests and their growth rates and the way they've managed their forests. From the start of last month, the 1st of September, we've been able to give the FMA data that we've collected to the Ministry of Primary Industries and get site-specific tables for carbon growth, which we can use to calculate our emissions returns at the start of next year, first quarter. This FMA process of measuring trees must be completed once every commitment period, which is once every 5 years. And we've only been able to do this process now. This commitment period finishes at the end of this year, so it's a bit of a mad rush at the moment to get this all done. The FMA process, or Field Measurement Assessment process involves 6 steps. The first step is assigning a forest class. That can either be, which is optional, you can either not assign a forest class, or it can be exotic or indigenous. Really the only time you do this is if your forest was indigenous or native, or parts of it were indigenous, in which case you can get away with half the frequency of plots for the indigenous vegetation. And that's to reflect the high plotting costs. There's multiple species in the indigenous generally, and a lot more trees to measure. Once you've assigned your forest class, or chosen not to, you can request your sample plot locations from Ministry of Primary Industries. To avoid bias, you can't use plots you may have may have there already from previous inventory or permanent sample plots. MPI have to give you a new set. They'll give you a minimum number they require depending on the area you've got in the ETS. You can choose to put in more plots if you wish. People aren't tending to put in more plots because of the cost. Just as a guide, if you have 100 hectares, the minimum number of plots is 30. If you have 100 hectares, the minimum plots you require is 30. If you have 150 hectares, the minimum is 34. And if you have 300 hectares, the minimum is 42. So the bigger the forest, the cheaper it's going to be, the more efficient for the FMA process. Right. Once you've got your plot locations, you have to go out into the field and establish where your plots are. Use a GPS, you have the plot locations downloaded onto that, and it's quite a procedure to find the plot locations. You can't go right to them with a GPS because there are some error, so you have to go within 30 metres but no closer, and then take compass bearings and go from there, and that's just to remove the bias. Then they have to be marked permanently with a steel rod and a wooden peg. So there's a bit of a process there. Once you've established your plot centre, then you go about collecting your information for trees, and you can collect information for shrubs if you wish, but that's optional. If you want to reduce cost, you can choose to nominate tree species if you've got multiple tree species. Now this would be relevant for if you've got radiata growing with an understory of Carnuka, which is in the case of Manuka Island, a local forest. If you didn't nominate species, you'd have to go and measure all the small Carnuka. It'll be quite a high cost of that. So the story there would be just to nominate the radiata, measure that, and don't worry about the Carnuka. That's going to die down anyway when the trees grow up. So there's little value added with extra carbon sequestration, but the cost will be a lot less. Once you've collected your information, you enter the data into the Primary Ministry's website. This can either be done manually from your plot sheets, typing it in, it takes some time, or if you're using a field computer, you can get an interface from Interpine which takes information from your field computer and downloads it straight into the MPI website. Once you've submitted your FMA information, MPI will check it for errors. Once it's clear of errors, you'll get your participant-specific tables, and then you can go and produce your emissions returns to claim your carbon credits. And those tables are just the same as default tables, but they're the regional default tables, but they're for your own forest. So supposedly to give a better indication of carbon growth or carbon sequestration. This FMA process is very new, and just some experiences to date with the process. It's good to have good mapping. Get your shape files, your carbon accounting areas on a map with your plot locations, and that's going to help if you've got plots on stand boundaries, because there's rules with measuring plots if you get any over boundaries or holes within the forest. So good mapping is important. The FMA fieldwork is quite complicated and involved as compared with normal forest inventory, similar to the permanent sample plot standards. From the data entered into the MPI website, there's been a significant amount of error reports coming back, which need to be sorted out before you can get your participant-specific tables. And that's a lot of stuff to do with the history, how the stand's been managed. The FMA process is not cheap due to the quality of the data required, the work required and involved, the data entry, and of course the topography and hindrance on the work site for the plotters. I've also briefly touched on it. The data entry into the MPI site is not straightforward, and it takes some time and cost as well. And when carbon was around $20 a unit, it wasn't such an issue, but many participants are now not happy with the FMA process and the cost of it. Even if they go through this process and it shows that their forest is producing extra carbon on top of the standard default tables that were initially used, they're not too excited about that, because it was fine when carbon was around $20. I think yesterday it was under $3, so there's not a lot to be gained for it there. As a result of this, some participants are choosing to pull out of the ETS because of the cost of the FMA process coming up. Some people have got into it for the opportunity. They haven't sold their carbon units, they've claimed it, and they're thinking, why go ahead and pay $10,000 plus for this process, and they're choosing to pull out. Other people have sold their carbon credits for around that $20 mark. They're coming up to the cost of the separate mate, and they're pulling out, and they can pull out with no liabilities as long as they repay the units back they've sold. And if they've sold at $20 and they can buy them back at $3, well, they get out of it, they've made good money, and they've got no liabilities going forward, and they can choose to join later as well. So there's also quite an uneven workload at the moment for the plotting contractors. There's a huge rush to get this work done by the end of the year. It has to be finished by 31st of December. So I think potentially there's going to be forest owners that miss out on getting this work done because they haven't got organised enough. A lot of the inventory plotting contractors are full up, and it does require specific skills and equipment. So I think there will be people missing out, and Ministry of Primary Industry said there will be I guess fines for people that haven't gone through this process. So yep, it's all very new. We're working through it, and certainly the price of carbon is taking the gloss of it with the cost. The cost depending on the forest, but per plot it's probably anywhere around $150 to $400 a plot, roughly. So just as a guide. So if you've got the minimum size forest of 100 hectares, 30 plots, times that sort of money, it sort of adds up. So yeah.
If you had under 100 hectares, can you opt to do a measurement and take advantage of the extra carbon you might get?
No, initially when they did the draft documents, they were looking at that, giving the forest owners an option, but no, you can't do that now. If you've got under 100 hectares, you can only use the default tables.
And if you have over 100 and you elect not to measure, you talk about fines. Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah. If you're trying to enter the ETS now and you just get your land through and you've got very little time, you can get a temporary waiver. But there's very few circumstances where that will happen. And MAP have said if you don't collect your data by the 31st of December, there will be fines, which will be similar to the price that it would have cost you to put the field plots in anyway. So
in that case, would it behove the person to withdraw from the ETS before the 31st?
Yes, which quite a few people are doing.
They will need to